Let me just say that if I had Magneto-like powers, I would probably just use those powers to like cut onions at a reasonable distance. That way I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't have like tears in my eyes because I'm a grown-ass man with a mustache, okay? Men with mustaches are not allowed to cry. I genuinely feel that superpowers would just be completely lost on me. Like, yeah, I would occasionally like stop a delivery truck from hitting somebody, like maybe, lift it over their head, but that would happen like once or twice in my entire life. Not because I wouldn't help, but just because I wouldn't actively go out there trying to fight crime. I don't deserve superpowers. Anyways, all jokes aside, in today's video, I thought we would cover the second part of that live stream, or kind of talk a little bit about it. And I know technically they didn't separate the live stream into two different sections, but that's just how I do it. That's how my small, tiny little reptilian brain broke this down. I essentially consider the Marvel Legends Spider-Man little section to be kind of its own little part, and then the second one was mostly just a bunch of X-Men action figures. And it's interesting because I gravitate way more towards the Spider-Man Marvel Legends action figures, but I do have a few more things to say about the X-Men. I feel like this is a lot more interesting, a lot more intricate reveals took place during that particular part of the live stream. And so I felt like it definitely deserves a little bit more of attention. So like I said, if you guys are interested in seeing like the first part where we talked about mostly the Spider-Man Marvel Legends, I do have that video up. But in today, we're going to talk about like that second half of the live stream. And I thought we would start off with, in my personal opinion, one of the most interesting reveals, and that has to be the Age of Apocalypse Gambit action figure. And I will say this is somewhat of a weird release, specifically because the team, or the original team that they released, what was it, like 6-7 years ago, is completely outdated. This was the Sugarman Build-A-Figure wave, if I'm not mistaken, and then they had the Age of Apocalypse deluxe action figure that got released within that same time frame. But all of those figures have aged, I wouldn't say incredibly poorly, but they're definitely not up to date with some of the new modern tech that Hasbro has been releasing. So that kind of raises the questions about whether we are going to get some of those re-released with newer tech or newer body molds. Only time will tell. So even though it is a great thing that Hasbro is going back and giving us a Gambit, or continuing to extend on the Age of Apocalypse collection, I think it is a little bit weird to release this figure like so many years later. And it's also worth noting that it does come with that ugly hard plastic cape, which I've been against now for quite a few years, especially after the DC Multiverse, or McFarlane, decided to integrate wired capes into his collectibles. But not only that, if you don't want to go too far, I mean, the Star Wars Black Series line also uses at least cloth capes. I don't think they've ever integrated wired capes, but at least cloth capes. I think this would have been a perfect opportunity to use with Gambit. I just hate that hard plastic. It looks like he's carrying like a small coffee table on his back, and the figure just does not display well enough when he is like in a crouched, hunched over position. It just does not look great, in my personal opinion. Speaking of action figures slash characters that are extremely late to the party, Hasbro also showed off their new Nightcrawler X-Force action figure. And I could be wrong, I'm just going off of memory, but didn't we get like the X-Force Deadpool like, I don't know, over 10 years ago, or at least it seems like over 10 years ago. Maybe it wasn't that long ago, but I clearly remember not having a mustache back then. Like, that's how long it's been since we got some of those X-Force characters. And now to be getting an X-Force Nightcrawler, it's just a huge span of time in between. And again, we're going back to that. A lot of the older figures for this particular team were on really old body molds, just completely outdated tech with ugly pins. So it's not the end of the world. It's not something that I'm going to pull my hairs out over. But it is interesting that they're deciding to release this figure now. There's nothing really that special about this body mold. I'm not 100% sure if this is just reused from a previous release of Nightcrawler, but I will say it's just the basic articulation at this point. You've got the single hinge at the ab crunch, you got some, swivels at the thighs and things of that nature. Nothing really too exciting. I've said it before, I want to see more of that. The newest Spider-Man body molds. This would have been a perfect opportunity here. Get that double ab section. I mean, this would be a prime candidate because Nightcrawler is one of those characters that is supposed to get into some really crazy dynamic poses, and well, this body mold, I think it does its job, but it's nothing really that innovative. It's not pushing anything forward. I will say it does come with a decent amount of accessories. It come, at least from the packaging, I think it came with like 3 hands, a blade or a sword, and then with an extra head sculpt, which is really cool. I mean, usually, especially with the Spider-Man Marvel Legends characters, not a lot of them came with a bunch of extras. I think all of the Spider-Man, like the Spider-Boy figure, might have come with an extra head sculpt, but I think the Spider-Man Unlimited did not come with one, and there were a few others in there that just were really lacking in accessories. This one comes with at least a decent array of accessories, and it'll give you different options when it comes out to displaying him. We also got a closer look at that X-Factor Cyclops, and I'm completely burnt out on a lot of these X-Men characters. I think Cyclops is definitely one. It seems like we get like 4 to 5, maybe 6 different variations of Cyclops on a yearly basis, and I get it, he's one of the heavy hitters. He's essentially one of the unnamed leaders of the X-Men, and so I completely get it, but I'm not really that intrigued by the character itself. I think most people are really excited about that the new effect pieces. I think most of them are reuse at this point. Like, I think we have about 2 to 3 different effect pieces for Cyclops that are in rotation. You know, they usually like switch one out for the other, but we're finally getting a new beam effect piece for Cyclops, and this is supposed to be like bouncing off of a surface or maybe a Sentinel. Who knows? If you have a Sentinel, I guess, lying around, this would absolutely look perfect. And I have to say, it's a breath of fresh air. It's something new. It's something that we've been waiting for quite some time to receive. I will also reiterate, we are getting some new electric effect pieces with the female Electro, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but those are supposed to be brand new as well, or at least I haven't seen them used as consistently. And this is another prime example of Hasbro actually putting some effort towards their releases. Not to mention, it will also come with a couple of extra hands as well as an extra head sculpt. So there's definitely value here with most of the figures that have been announced, at least when it comes down to the X-Men related characters. Not so much with the Spider-Man, but this figure I think comes with, I believe, like 2 different effect pieces, the couple of extra hands, and then the extra head sculpt, which, as I said, that's pretty good value for the $25 price point. And then, of course, it couldn't be an X-Men reveal without at least one Wolverine character. We are getting an Extreme Wolverine, which will come with 6 hands total. No extra head sculpt. That was a little bit baffling. Usually, Wolverine tends to come with some extra head sculpts. I would have thought that it came with one, especially considering this does not come with a Build-A-Figure piece. It was kind of an interesting choice here from Hasbro, but I've heard, and I think everybody's beaten this to death at this point, but I've heard pretty consistently that the budget is like spread across the entire wave, so it's not like a per figure basis. So I'm assuming that the budget probably was spread out across the other figures, because I feel like the Wolverine is lacking just a little bit. And I'm not sure if this is a new body mold here. It looks like it's reusing certain pieces. Like, I've seen certain limbs used for like Venom, maybe the legs or the lower legs, something along those lines. But I will say, it's another Wolverine figure, and I can't keep track of all of these like X-Men related team ups, but if this is a Wolverine that you've been waiting for, now is your opportunity to pick him up. I will say there are a couple of things that I like about this body mold. I love the fact that they're willing to cut away more with the butterfly joints. I've said this before. I'm okay with them cutting up the body mold just a little bit more for the sake of getting into some crazier articulation, and that's exactly what they do with this Wolverine. You can actually see the butterfly joints cut a little bit deeper into the chest portion, which is not something that you usually see with Marvel Legends action figures. But I hate the arms. I'm not sure if they're the same ones for the first appearance 2-pack, because I have, you know, a decent amount of experience with that particular Wolverine, but those arms were just not my favorite, especially where the pins connect the joints or the elbows. That plastic tends to pop up. I'm not sure why. Maybe the pins can't quite hold down the thickness of the arms, but it is a little bit disappointing. It's a good solid figure for those people that are looking to complete that universe, but for me personally, I'm not really too interested. I have probably like 5 different Wolverines. I don't know if I need another one, to be brutally honest. But if you were looking for new characters, something to really pique your interest, they did show off Marrow as well as Husk, both kind of like C-list X-Men characters, I guess. They're not that well known unless you're reading comic books, and I can't even remember if they make appearances in any of like the animated series, but they're definitely two of the characters that I think, like I said, were the most intriguing here. Although I will say, being brutally honest, these are the two prime candidates for ending up like on the clearance aisle or for like an insane sale eventually. I could see both of these figures going for about like $10 a pop. That's not being brutal, that's not me being like negative, it just is what it is. These like C-list X-Men characters usually end up going on sale because they're just not too familiar to the casual fans. Only hardcores are going to be interested in characters like this. I will say credit where credit is due. Hasbro did throw in a decent amount of accessories for both of these characters, and it's not something that they usually do. We've seen it before, like Speedball is a perfect example. Like the figure came with absolutely nothing. It was just the plain figure with a Build-A-Figure piece, and usually these like lesser known characters just don't get they don't get the love, they don't get the respect or the accessories. And here Hasbro has done something that I didn't expect. They threw a curveball at me. Both of these characters, as I said, both of these action figures do come with a decent array of accessories. Now, what character do you get to build with this particular wave? Well, it's none other than Nemesis, Apocalypse's son. And this is really interesting. I've said this for years now. And by the way, I do like this Build-A-Figure. Great detail. I think this may be the first time that we're seeing this particular body mold. And if not, I guess they're kind of retooling a body mold that I'm not too familiar with. But it looks cool. It's going to display incredibly well. And it's a big hunk of plastic. I actually genuinely like this particular Build-A-Figure, but I have been preaching now for quite some time that I do feel like we need to go away from Build-A-Figures. I would much rather have everything released in a deluxe setting. You force collectors to try to pick up 6-7 different figures for a particular Build-A-Figure, and I just don't feel like that's necessarily fair, especially considering a lot of these are, as I said, lesser known characters. It's very interesting because back in the day we would often see like 2 to 3 different figures from a particular wave just completely sell out and then have the rest of the wave essentially be peg warmers. It really threw the entire community in disarray because some people were able to find certain pieces or certain figures, and then others just really struggled out in the wild. So it just made no sense. Now often, or I should say more often than not recently, we do get everything pretty readily available, but there are times when you find that wave where 2 to 3 different figures do sell out pretty quickly. But it does technically benefit Hasbro because if you really stop to think about it, there may be a lot of collectors out there that come very close to completing the wave. Let's say 2 of these do become extremely difficult to find, and collectors are just not willing to pay, let's say, the extra $40 to $50. In some cases, they'll collect most of the wave, let's say 4 to 5 different figures, and they fall short maybe 1 to 2 figures. But then if they do decide to re-release the deluxe figure, usually people will just jump on that opportunity instead, even though they essentially already completed the other Build-A-Figure aside from a piece here or there. So it's pretty smart on Hasbro's side of things. But just in my personal opinion, I think we should just move away from Build-A-Figures altogether. So there you guys have it. I just wanted to give you guys a quick little recap of, like I said, the second part of that little live stream that Hasbro did. It's kind of a mixed bag. Same thing with the Spider-Man Marvel Legends reveals. A lot of that was pretty frustrating. It was head scratching, and I think this was a little bit of that, but a lot more positive here. They're going back, they're allowing you to complete a lot of teams, whether it's X-Force, with the new Nightcrawler or the Age of Apocalypse stuff. It's really cool. And then we get Nemesis, which I don't think we've ever received in action figure form, or if we did, I think we received like a more classic old iteration, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. All I will say is it's exciting. It's really cool to see new accessory pieces. Only time will tell if we're able to get more consistency from Hasbro in the foreseeable future. As always, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Did you pick up any of these figures? Do you plan on picking any of them up? Are there any of these that really get you excited, that get the juices flowing inside of your veins? Is there anything that gets your heart pumping? Let me know down below in the comment section. Are you disappointed overall? I mean, which figures do you feel like fell a little bit short? Very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling content, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently. As always, the most important part of all this, make sure to enjoy the hobby, enjoy your action figures, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.